Spelljammer is finally here, and it comes with 6 new awesome race options for your games, but wait a second. Oh no, is that a power creep? So let's set sail with these new star-studded options for player character races. Across all of these, we'll have the option of assigning our racial ability score increases wherever we'd like. A change that I've been really happy with in recent Wizards of the Coast releases, but one that I know at least some of you aren't fond of. Realistically, even though the book says that you may assign a +2 and +1 to 2 different ability scores, or a +1 to 3 different scores, I'm sure it wouldn't be that hard to homebrew some more static racial traits if you prefer to play it that way. Additionally, all of the choices that I'll be covering allow your character to speak, read, and write common and one other language. Now, that said, what fantasy setting would be complete without some elven variant option? I mean, it's not like we already had some other pointy-eared creature native to the astral plane. And so we begin with the Astral Elf, a subset of the traditional variety that left the Feywild long ago to become closer to their gods. This endeavor has gifted them with an interesting divine spark that manifests as a starry gleam in their eyes, and their typical long-lived nature has seemingly been extended even further, so they often display an odd perspective on the passage of time that makes them somewhat melancholy or emotionless. Mechanically, they're considered medium humanoid creatures with 30 feet of walking speed and gain access to either Dancing Lights, Light, or the Sacred Flame cantrip through an ability called Astral Fire that allows you to choose Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma as your spellcasting ability for whatever cantrip you choose. These elves will also gain proficiency in Perception, arguably the most important skill in the game. A magical 30-foot teleport that you can use proficiency bonus times per long rest, and the lovely trance feature that specifically states that they can finish a long rest in just 4 hours. If you're curious as to why that's so nice to have, you may want to check out my sorcerer guide. Trust me, it's good. But probably my favorite part of this race is that you can select one skill in one weapon or tool after each of these trances and gain proficiency with them until your next long rest. That's always going to come in handy. Need to sneak around an encounter? Take stealth. Need to lift something heavy? Take athletics. This race gives you a ton of bang for buck, so I definitely plan to use it sometime in the future. Next, the Autognome comes in as a particularly unique entry that allows us to play as a construct for the very first time. Not even Warforged carry this classification. As you might guess, these creatures were created by other gnomes, but somehow became self-aware and left their owners. But the apple doesn't fall far from the tree here, as Autognomes share a similar lifespan of up to 500 years, are small in size, and can speak and understand the gnomish language. But that's about where the similarities end, as they get 30 feet of movement speed increased from the typical 25 feet that gnomes get, an increased unarmored AC of 13 plus their dexterity modifier, the ability to spend hit die when mending is cast on you, and resistance to poison damage, immunity to disease, and advantage on saving throws against being paralyzed or poisoned. The Autognome doesn't even need to eat, drink, or breathe. Just these racial traits alone would have typically been enough for a race option in the past, but the Autognome even gets 2 extra tool proficiencies, the ability to stay conscious for 6 hours of a long rest, and an awesome ability called Built for Success that allows you to add a D4 to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw proficiency bonus times per long rest. And stacking something like that with a casting of Bless or Guidance is really going to boost your character's reliability. Now, it should be noted that there may typically be some drawbacks to playing a construct. While it's true that you'd be impervious to certain harmful effects and spells that target humanoids like Hold Person or Charm Person, you would also normally be unable to benefit from helpful healing spells that don't affect undead or constructs. But Wizards of the Coast even has you covered there, stating that Autognomes have been designed to still benefit from castings of Cure Wounds, Healing Word, Mass Cure Wounds, Mass Healing Word, and Spare the Dying specifically. This race is just crazy good, and I can already imagine a ton of different applications for its abilities as pretty much every class out there. Now it's time to move on to the Giff. Or is it Giff? Regardless of how you pronounce it, it's definitely Giff. These hippo creatures are medium humanoids with 30 feet of walking speed and a swimming speed equal to that number. They are astral wanderers that have long since forgotten where they came from or what gods created them. And with their goofy appearance, surely they're not a problem for game balance, right? Well, they only have 3 abilities really, so it can't be that bad. Firstly, they have a proficiency with firearms and may ignore the loading property of said weapons thanks to a divine connection to their forgotten gods. They can even strike from long range with firearms without having disadvantage imposed on their attack rolls. This one ability comes in with power consistent with a feat, and that's just the start. They'll also gain advantage on strength-based ability checks and saving throws and count as 1 size larger when determining carrying capacity. But the icing on top for this race comes in the form of Astral Spark. This trait enables the Giff to cause extra force damage equal to their proficiency bonus when they hit a target with a simple or martial weapon. They can only do this once per turn and proficiency bonus times per long rest, but that can still lend itself really well to martial builds. In particular, I can't wait to create a sharpshooting ranger, rogue, or maybe even a gunk, which is a gun-wielding monk, with this race. It doesn't work well for everything, but it's very, very good for any character that might use firearms. Okay, now it's time for the Hadozee, a fairly unassuming medium or small monkey-like humanoid creature with flaps of skin running from their hands down to their feet that allow them to glide through the air. Oh, gods of the Giff! The power creep is out of control! Or is it? Hadozee have a 30-foot walking speed and a climbing speed equal to that number, with an interesting ability that allows them to reduce an instance of damage by a d6 plus your proficiency bonus as a reaction proficiency bonus times per long rest. I'd say that's pretty cool and definitely could lend itself to any frontline martial builds that need a little boost in longevity, like the monk or maybe some rogues. These creatures can even use their feet as a bonus action to manipulate an object, open or close a door or container, or pick up or set down a tiny object. Specifically, I don't think this is going to allow you to activate magic items or swing weapons around with them, but it could be an interesting ability for deploying traps like grease or caltrops. That said, what's most interesting about the Hadozee is their glide ability that allows them to avoid taking fall damage as a reaction and to move 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot that they descend in the air at no movement cost to them. Yes, you heard that right. This does indeed mean that the Hadozee can mechanically cover extremely long distances in an incredibly short amount of time. Considering that the maximum fall speed in a turn is usually 500 feet per round, with a round being 6 seconds, this means that the Hadozee with a high enough perch can travel 2,500 feet in under 6 seconds, not including their 30-foot movement speed. Holy crap! But where's the power creep? Well, aside from the fact that you could conceivably do wonky things with the high jump mechanics to cheese out bonus movement on your turns, since the glide has no minimum fall distance, I don't think that there is much, if any, power creep here. Most DMs aren't going to allow the jumping and gliding cheese, and flying down from a high perch to cover a ton of ground isn't really going to do all that much for you in most situations. You wouldn't really be able to interrupt your glide for any actions or bonus actions, and how often do you really need to cover that much distance? Don't get me wrong, it's a really cool ability that can definitely be broken with some pretty bad faith interpretations of rules as written, but I don't think it's going to break anything any more than your average flying race, no matter what the panic peddling D&D YouTube seems to be implying at this moment. Next up, we have the Plasmoid, a medium or small ooze creature with a 30-foot walking speed and the ability to squish down through spaces as narrow as 1 inch wide. We've never really had a race give us an option like this, so that's really exciting to me, even if I'll probably just take the chance to make a literal squishy wizard character. Interestingly enough, these creatures are amorphous blobs that can interact with armor and objects just as humanoids do, but also lend themselves to a ton of unique role-playing interactions through changing their color by absorbing dyes through their pores, eating food that you can see then floating around inside of them, and devolving into something resembling a puddle when they sleep. This race option also gives players dark vision, advantage on ability checks to initiate or escape grapples, the ability to hold your breath for an hour, resistance to acid and poison damage, and advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. Now, although you'll most likely spend most of your time in a shape resembling a humanoid with 2 arms and 2 legs, you can also revert to your ooze-like nature, and you can extend a pseudopod that is up to 6 inches wide and 10 feet long as a bonus action. While notably the pseudopod can't activate magic items, attack, lift more than 10 pounds, and has no sensory organs, it's perfect for sneakily swiping objects or opening and closing doors. This might all look a bit underwhelming to some of you after seeing the last few races, but being able to slip in and out of tiny holes in dungeons and interacting with objects in such interesting ways really makes me want to play a Plasmoid rogue or something similar. Finally, the Thri-Kreen have mostly flown under the radar, but easily still hold their own amongst the other entries as a medium or small monstrosity with a 30-foot walking speed and dark vision. These insect-like creatures don't need sleep and can alter the look and color of their chitinous shells as an action to give themselves advantage on stealth checks to hide in surroundings consistent with that color. As per some of the other options we've covered thus far, choosing this race would mean that you automatically gain immunity to certain spells and effects that specify humanoids as a target, but this race will also grant you a base AC of 13 plus your dexterity, which is distinctly different from an unarmored AC like we discussed earlier with the Autognome. What's probably most noteworthy about this race, however, is their second set of slightly smaller arms just below their main set. These allow them to manipulate objects consistent with some of the last few entries, but they can even wield a weapon in them that has the light property. There's nothing here explicitly stating that they can't also be used to activate a magic item as well. So there may be something to that if your DM allows it. The Thri-Kreen even have an extremely interesting telepathic ability that says anytime you attempt to speak a non-Thri-Kreen language that you know without the aid of magic to do so, you use your antenna to transmit your thoughts to willing creatures within 120 feet of you. The creature doesn't need to share a language with you to understand your thoughts and only needs to be able to speak at least one language. I can imagine a ton of interesting builds involving the use of extra hands for various items and weaponry, and it could even be interesting to RP a character that doesn't technically speak, making them something of a strong silent type or the muscle of the group. Truly, all of these options offer something unique and powerful that we haven't yet seen in D&D 5e, and the end result of choosing one of these can be pretty strong for a character too. But do any of them break the game? Do they need to be banned outside of Spelljammer? I don't think so, personally. While these types of decisions are usually best left to the DM of any given game table, this all comes on the heels of an overhaul in player races via Monsters of the Multiverse, and many of those races got a significant boost as well. For all of the near panic I've seen across social media and YouTube, I don't really think that these are much stronger than some of the options we had already, if at all. Look, a little power creep is always going to be present in these kinds of releases, and I'm okay with that. But what did you think? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, as always, go out there and make some chaos.